You are in the right place. We have, I think, a larger online attendance than in person, but you're very welcome. And you said we had 2 out there still? Okay. We will hold off on really getting started until we have our known attendees here, but we'll try to get going within the next 5 minutes because we do have a very full slate of content. Okay, we are at 1:03. We'll wait until 1:05. I have seen at least one board member arrive, and so about 1:05 we'll officially get started. Okay, we are at 1:05, and so I'm going to go ahead and have Roger begin recording. We have roll call as our first item on the agenda, and I know we've got a few board members here, a few board members online, some who weren't able to attend, and so mostly this is just a formality because we do have a gathering of board members and we want to honor and respect open meeting laws. And so can I get a confirmation if we're recording? Okay, we are recording. And so if each board member would just state your name, I will take a record of that and we'll do a roll call a little bit less formally than we sometimes do. Let's start with in person. I see, okay. We do have some feedback going on. Let's see, and then I can read through the list of board members that I'm seeing online. I have Gary Schmidt.
Aye.
Lucas Johnson. Miranda Penner.
Hello.
And looks like Brad Snap. Okay, and if any other board members arrive, then we will add them to our list just to reflect those who are gathered today. Um, and so give me just a moment to queue up the shared screen. And we will officially get started. Okay, here we are. Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you for attending the joint board workshop today. This is January 11th, 2024, and this is a meeting of the Wichita Land Bank Board of Trustees and the Affordable Housing Review Board. I'm Sarah Gooding. I'm your Real Property Section Manager within Housing and Community Services, and just wanted to share a little bit about the meeting today. This became kind of a conversation with each of the two boards that started just with curiosity about the work beyond the board's own scope and the work of the other board, the work of the housing department. And as we took ideas and considerations for what this meeting should include, it quickly grew to where today it's really going to be more of a masterclass on housing in the city of Wichita. We have several presenters from departments including Metropolitan Area Building and Planning, or Building and Planning Department, I'm sorry, I am butchering the names, MABCD, MAPD, Economic Development, and Housing. And I will let them each share a little bit more about their own department and work here as we go forward. A little bit of history about this. I wanted to just share a little bit about what each board's kind of conditions for existing are. Wichita Land Bank Board of Trustees is really a governing mechanism for the land bank that is common to most land banks. Land bank has been a concept considered within the city of Wichita for several years and really grew into an awareness and a priority through the Places for People plan that was done in 2019. We'll share a little bit more about that later on, but a board like, or an entity like a land bank really needs a governing structure. And so the board was created with a council appointee from each district to govern that entity. The board oversees the possession and control of acquired property. They work with staff to manage operations for the land bank, and they're really the ones that vet, recommend, and care for, steward that land bank organization. The Affordable Housing Review Board emerged alongside the Affordable Housing Fund opportunity that came out of the COVID pandemic. And so once again, this is a council appointed board. It is 7 members with an appointee by each council member. And they provide professional expertise and community perspective evaluating proposals for affordable housing programming. This work includes the Affordable Housing Fund. It includes housing development loan program applications and projects, and may grow to include components of the home ARP plan, depending on how initial proposals go. And so where we are now, really the work that creates affordable housing and opportunities within isn't just one department. We do have a housing and community services department in the city, but multiple city departments help create that environment in which housing is planned, developed, and maintained. And so housing and community services really tend to focus on subsidized components of housing, and then other departments focus more broadly. And so that's where we want to begin today, is with talking about some of the work done by departments outside of housing and community services. We will end with the work within housing and community services, take a quick break, and then come back and talk more specifically about affordable housing units and the work of these two boards. And then if time permits, we'll take a look ahead at some of the places that we may be going in the future. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Chris LeBrum, Director of the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department.
Thank you, Sarah.
Let me make sure that my screen is actually sharing the way it should be before we get deep in the presentations. I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Let's see, is that better? Okay, so Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
All right. And again, thanks. So this is it's a first to talk from this podium facing this direction. That's kind of interesting. As Sarah said, Chris Labrum, I'm the director of Metro Area Building and Construction Department, usually MABCD. It's a mouthful. Kind of a interesting name and an interesting story there. We won't get into today, but a little bit about us, I think. It may not be, and I'm gonna go. If not, I'll just keyboard it. Go. Did I turn it back off or on? Yeah. Down either. All right, I can do that. So.
Thank you for being the troubleshooter.
Yeah, it has been one of those days. I will vouch for that. This has been a hopping one. Yes, happy to be here. Just real quickly, a little bit. Sarah did say to introduce ourselves just a bit. I've been with MABCD for 6.5 years now. I am actually a county employee. We are a county managed department, but as part of my job description and part of my contract, I also serve as a department director for the city. So, and report to the city under the same obligations to receive permission from the city manager's office, approvals from city council, et cetera, that I am with the county. So we are, and I am actually not a building guy by trade. I'm an aircraft guy. I was, by the time I retired, finally, I was 26 years and change with the Air Force. So spent my time at first flying airplanes and then being in charge of everything to fix and schedule and all of that, the airplanes. So I've probably said this 1,000 times since I've been here. The job here, since as running a government organization, is totally different, but exactly the same as what I did for so long with the Department of Defense and the Air Force. But anyway, the nature of our department kind of evolved to the point that, as you'll see in the sections that we get to here, we removed the requirement for the department director to actually be a certified building official and to be that expert at that level of the buildings, just because of the diverse nature of the department. So, as stated, we are a joint agency, and we oversee Sedgwick County as well as City of Wichita. So most of our Sedgwick County work, of course, is directed towards the unincorporated, but there are 20 small towns, small cities. If you take Derby out of that, they're a Class B city. The rest is a Class C cities. We assist them at various levels, each one of them. Some we just assist with inspections on occasion. Some we do all of the building work for them. We do not do any of the nuisance type abatement that we'll talk about here, of that gamut. We do not do any of that with the small cities. So anything inside another city's jurisdiction that has to do with anything from junk and trash to a dilapidated fallen down house, that is still all on that city. The three sections then that we have, building and land use, our land, so building is going to include all of our permitting, our inspecting, new buildings, remodels, repairs, et cetera, that require a permit. The land use here, not as applicable to this discussion. That's going to be unincorporated county, wastewater systems, water well systems, anything like that in the unincorporated. Permits, so properly titled are administrative services, but for these purposes, for understanding permits and licensing, so all of your contractor licensing, not business licensing, but contractors, certification of trades and trades technicians, plumbers, electricians, mechanical, the journeyman, apprentice, journeyman, master, those certifications all also are verified by us. And then, yes, the permits. So, and then our main focus for this will be neighborhood inspection, of course, and the things that get into combating blight. So quickly, not to spend too much time on it, we are, though, a pretty busy department, 85 employees. Last year, our building section did just over 103,000 inspections. Our permits and licensing, we about 39,000 permits, did in the neighborhood of 4,000 licensing and certifications. So we roll through a few transactions there. Neighborhood inspection will, on average, manage in the 9,000s. It's usually just short of 10,000 total cases in a year that they will manage. So it is fairly high volume. And I'll put it out to a guess too, because you talk about phone calls, emails, all that. Anybody have a guess as to how many phone calls my department gets in a year? Two, I'll second that. But so about 85,000. So our main line, which goes through the building and administrative services, will get about 60 to 65,000 calls a year, and then about 25,000 calls to the neighborhood inspection line. So a lot of those being complaints and issues that folks want us to go take a look at. I threw this up there just so you would have it in the packet. But this is our mission and vision, and the main takeaway here is trying to keep everything up to code, and property maintenance is included in that code. Our obligations for that. So now getting to the meat, a little more of what you want to see here, I hope. So tell me if you're looking for something a little different, or if you've got something specific to address, please. We get into the combating of blight when we talk building and permits. Mostly where you're going to see us come into play is an economic development incentive or program, something we've got Mr. Anderson here. Some of the things Troy will talk about, we're going to support those, right, in any way we can and in whatever is agreed to by the manager's office, city council, county commission, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have a few hoops to jump through. But we do that. If I didn't say before, it's kind of interesting that I'm going first today, because usually it's the other way around. Most of the things we do have gone through several other departments. They've gone through planning, they've gone through public works, they've gone through economic development, fire department, in either all or some of those, depending on the project, before it gets to us. So that kind of concept spills over into and including our neighborhood inspection. Most of our stuff is designed to either execute a plan that has been figured out with others, or to take care of a problem that is already present. So some of our thoughts, maybe some challenge, some things that I would pose to this group as we want your help with is areas, how do we get more in front of that, right? How and what can the city as a whole do to get to things earlier if we're talking about preservation. But I'll get into that just a little bit more as we go. So a couple examples that we have out there, the urban infill pilot that is taking place. So it's titled Infill Urban, or it's titled Infill. It provides fee waivers in the formative areas of the city, formative areas as defined by the planning department. I don't know if you all are familiar with that and how they work, but the city is segmented out by the planning department into kind of where the neighborhood is, right? Is it developing? Is it mature? If formative is a nice way of saying a little bit, in need of help. So we applied that to those. Now, city was looking for a place to start. We knew that this had limitations because really what it does is waive MABCD related fees. And then if there's some cleanup and removal on a site, it allows some of the dump fees to be waived with a part of that. So we haven't really seen it change the amount of housing that's being rebuilt in these formative areas, like as in true infill. We have seen it help a lot of individuals who are looking to fix things up. So that is a positive. That's something to maybe to work off of. At this point, we've waived about $210,000 worth of fees, and that's been spread across just over 2,000 permits. So you could say we've helped 2,000 homeowners or renters, whatever they were. But we've helped with that many repairs on dwellings. And also included in that is that we give a level of waivers for commercial projects. We've had three commercial projects that are providing apartments, two of those associated with WSU. And in that area, one of those is 3000 West Kellogg, which is being converted from an office building to apartments. And those all were eligible for $10,000 fee waivers on the commercial side. Another thing we do um, and have done in conjunction with some of these efforts is we still waive fees for nonprofit agencies that are providing housing. That is done through the Housing Department's home program. So since there is a revenue offset there for the grant, we use that as grant matching. The Builders Association agrees to that. We continue to report that every year and ensure that, to the best of my ability, I try to ensure that all agencies are still on board with that as a good program, and we've been able to continue to do that. So again, it's not a whole lot, but when you save Habitat for Humanity or Mennonite Housing $700 or $800 worth of fees, that makes a big difference when they're trying to keep those cost margins level. So it takes us to neighborhood inspection. Again, kind of the big focus of what we'd look at today. And in neighborhood, so you're breaking it down across three categories. Nuisance is a kind of a broad one, but nuisance and abatement, so that's going to include tall grass and weeds, junk and trash on the property. Um, Within that is the illegal dumping program. If you all are familiar with that, that's actually paid for out of public works funding, but it's managed by us, so it's a little bit separate from this. But public areas that get dumped on, we try to clean those up, because what we find is prosecution and legal recourse or legal means of dealing with that tend to be very slow and painful and costly. And while you're waiting on that, they grow, like the dump really grows. So we go ahead and get rid of them, do what we can on the backside. So that is an interesting program in and of itself. But bottom line is, yeah, if we can mow it, tow it, or clean it up, and I say tow it, inoperable vehicles has become much more of an issue lately for us. And interestingly, is something that the city has become much more aggressive, for lack of a better term, in dealing with over just the last couple of years. So bounces us to housing cases. So these are going to be anything that's going to be to do with conditions of the house. You're starting to have problems with roofing, siding, a porch, things like that. We will write that up all the way to vacant houses that are starting to fall in on themselves. So, and in this case, if we're talking, again, occupied, so we're trying to remind the owner of their responsibility of upkeep of the property. Our challenges come in with vacant properties, and the main action we have on those is we board them up. Rules say they've got to stay secure, which does not always solve the problem, which generally does not solve the problems. We see a lot of fires in vacant houses. Obviously starts out with fire department, but then that comes to us, kind of a very, very challenging one there. And not to spend too long on this one, but where housing cases are challenging for us is, again, you go back to, I can mow it, I can tow it, I can clean it up, I can go do all that stuff, right? We can sign off, send a contractor to go handle that, I can send a contractor to board it up. And if it's vacant and that bad, I can tear it down. But if we've got just a house that is going into dilapidation, it's going into blight, something that we as a group are trying to save, there's no tool to force that compliance in my toolbox. We take them to court, and it goes a lot of ways from there. It's very interesting. Now, well, I shouldn't say no tools. I do have one tool, which is some level of assistance that we try to provide. So we have a code liaison program. One current limitation of that program is you've already got to be in trouble with me. So if you've got a case with us and now we're talking a house going into blight and we've got whether due to health, income, age, all of the above, we know that assistance is required. We have 2 social workers on our staff. They work with our inspectors and they work with local volunteer groups. Several of the local high schools have programs where they volunteer a couple, 3 times a year. We work with the community service reps in conjunction with their neighborhood cleanups and some of those to try to time things right. A lot of what we fund through that program is dumpsters at properties so that we can clean up those premise conditions. We buy a lot of paint. We buy a lot of things like that to help with those smaller home repairs, which again will help in a lot of individual cases. We then, though, we see those go beyond that. Now we just don't have a lot to address those. But that code liaison program has been very successful for its scope and what it is able to do. Um, the one I've got here with the reactive versus proactive, what I don't want that does not have anything to do with how we do our job, right? We always want to be very proactive in the way we do our job. But one question that is posed to the city as a whole is how do we want to approach property issues? Do we wait until we have a complaint? We wait until it's impacting neighbors, impacting the property rights of others, and then we step in, which has generally been the case and normally what we've done? Or do we be more proactive? Do we go out and actually look, for potential issues? So again, one for discussion. A few points I want to hit then. I think I skipped condemnation, didn't I? So kind of skipped over that. Condemnation, if I've got a vacant house, has to be vacant, can't be occupied, and we're getting into deep dilapidation, not normally going to get that bad, right? This house was actually just barely outside of the city limits, or it wouldn't have been allowed to go that far. It has been removed now by the owner. But I did want to kind of illustrate the point that when we are getting into condemnation, you're pretty deep into my processes. We're getting a lot of complaints. Neighbors are, neighbors are telling us there's a lot of issues, that it's causing them issues. And so we're pushing into that. Unfortunately, a lot of times we do not have an owner. Owner's deceased, heirs will not take the property, cannot take the property. We could talk a long time about the complications with that. And again, the frustration being that when you get to this point, you're pretty late in the preservation effort. So what some of the work we have done is to actually accelerate that process, which may seem on the surface a little counterintuitive to preservation, but it does have 2 parts. One is to remove hazards from the city, which that is there, truth in lending. But the other thing that does is we try to accelerate the involvement there. So if we are going to get to this point, we are much earlier in the process able to identify if we have an owner if we have any claimer or owner to the property who's going to step up and try and get engaged. We can maybe get them together with resources. So kind of that last one there, how do we influence or change some of these outcomes? Realize you're hearing me talking here, right? So this is me throwing some things out there, not speaking on behalf of our city manager or our city council, but some of the things we have looked at is to say, okay, as we drive things into our process, we identify problem properties. Yeah, what else could be done? Counseling resources at our community centers. Could we have city staff designated, and this is a budget thing, so becomes a little tricky, but would we be in a spot where we have maybe a coordinator works between the community centers, you're able to get an appointment, this person would be able to evaluate what you've got and explain to you what it may mean to probate your title of your parents' house. Parents are deceased, they didn't actually turn title over to you with their will, but you are the heir to that. What does that mean? What would you have to do? Now you're going to have limitations there. We could tell you how long that takes. We have actually had some of our local real estate agencies Realtors of South Central Kansas. We've had some of our legal, local legal groups have stated that they would be open to discussions on some pro bono work to assist with that. So maybe, at this case, we could get people resources beyond just saying, here's what you got to do, and you got to go find a lawyer. Because lawyers will usually give them a couple free hours to help them out, but a lot of times you're talking a much more lengthy process than that. So, that's one. As we've expanded our code liaison program recently, there's the thought we could potentially be more proactive with that. Don't necessarily have to have the level of case, et cetera, with those. So those are kind of a few things we've had out there. But again, the concern is you've got to make that a little bigger and broader than just my department if you're really going to be able to affect much change. So, we have, I'll just kind of pitch that out there. Again, just so that it would be included with the info you have, if you've got further questions, et cetera, that's how you can get a us. And I don't want to go too early there for you, Justin, but so I'll be happy to field any questions, comments, concerns, et cetera.
I was going to say thank you for so much. I think you're starting to see the big picture already. I'll speak into the mic just for the recording. Because of time constraints, I would encourage maybe hold questions and we can bring these back to the individual boards. Otherwise, we've got so much planned today that we won't get through the content. But again, feel free to write down questions and we can invite any speaker today back as a guest to any of our board meetings. And so with that, I wanted to introduce Justin Constantino from MAPD and let him share a little bit about the history of the land bank and an overview of planning.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. Justin Constantino with the Metropolitan Area Planning Department. Just a little bit about myself. I've been with the city now for 2 months. A lot of this information I'm learning along with you, but fortunately I do have a decent history with planning, and I will basically break down my presentation into 2 separate formats. The first being kind of a history of the land bank. Sarah touched upon this a little bit during the introduction of this meeting. And then the second part of my presentation, I'll shift gears a little bit and start talking about certain planning variables that could potentially affect affordable housing. So again, just a little bit about the planning department. We are a joint planning department, meaning we work for both the city of Wichita and Sedgwick County, meaning we answer to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, the Wichita City Council, as well as the Board of County Commissioners, as well as several other boards and committees. Just to kind of, like I mentioned before, I'm going to split this into a couple different things. I'll start with discussing our existing plans. I'll discuss the community investments plan, the places for people plan, and the land bank. And then, like I said, the second half of my presentation, I'll get into some of those planning variables. I have a lot of slides here, but I will go through them pretty quickly. So the community investment plan, this was a 20-year plan that was adopted in 2016 by both the city and the county, with a focus on infrastructure, transportation, water, and financing infrastructure improvements. This also included in the plan was a recommendation for an urban infill strategy and the concept of an established central area. A lot of public input went into this plan. The community investments plan took about 4 years to establish. It involved more than 4,000 survey responses and over 50 public meetings and events. It's a very important document, and public input is generally the most important aspect that goes into a community investments plan or a comprehensive plan. Basically, is a document that's like a roadmap for the city's future for the next 20 years. The plan is set to expire in 2035. However, we touch upon this plan regularly for updates, and we get feedback from citizens, council members, elected officials, planning commissioners, and so on. Certain community trends are developed with the creation of the comprehensive plan. Again, the desire for smaller households, That came out of the comprehensive plan. There were several trends that came out of that. There was a concern about, as the population aged, as our community got older, aging in place concerns, as our community becomes more diverse, how housing will impact those communities as well. And then it also signaled the desire for more transportation options, not just by automobile, but by walking, public transit, bicycle, or on foot. The urban infill strategy was a significant portion of the comprehensive plan. Basically, what does urban infill means in short? It's the reinvestment in our existing neighborhoods. Utilizing existing areas helps us take advantage of our existing infrastructure and services while also improving the quality of life in areas experiencing abandonment or decline. This is the this is the map that was associated with the urban infill strategy. This depicts the central area. It's pretty broad. It's essentially the areas in Wichita that were developed prior to 1960. So really it's the core of the city. The map extends from Ridge Road to the west, Rock Road to the east, 29th Street to the north, and 31st Street to the south. As I mentioned, this plan, the Community Investments Plan, or our comprehensive plan, called for an urban infill strategy. That strategy developed into the Places for People plan. The Places for People plan was adopted in 2019 with a vision for strong neighborhoods and vibrant centers. The way to achieve that vision is through investment in existing areas of our community with an emphasis on walkable design, multimodal transportation, and a variety of other housing options. We received a lot of feedback during the creation of the Places for People plan. Again, public input was paramount to the success of this plan. We conducted over 55 public meetings in the development of the plan and had several surveys. We had a visual preference survey of more than 300 responses. Out of the plan, there were three very important strategies, several of which are pertinent to this afternoon's discussion, including land bank recommendations, zoning recommendations, and strategic investment strategy. In other words, it's looking at areas where community investment is not currently happening. So regarding the land bank, many of you are familiar with this, but I will go over it briefly. It's a government entity focused on the conversion of land to public use, or excuse me, to productive use. The land is often vacant, abandoned, or tax delinquent. Here's a photo. These photos are from Habitat for Humanity. As you can see, the property can be either abandoned or there could be issues with the title, which is preventing the property from being sold or utilized. In short, the land bank gets the property back to productive use. As part of our research, the city looked at land banks in 9 other communities to determine how they operate and how they are organized. We found that the majority of those communities primarily focused on affordable housing, home ownership, and revitalization of existing neighborhoods. Almost all of them required a subsidy for operations. Staffing for land banks varied based in those communities. Generally, we found it took anywhere between 1 to 7 full-time employees. Just to recap, again, some of the tools that come out of the land bank, the goal of the program is specifically to have the ability to abate special assessments and back taxes, manage and maintain property to prevent them from turning into nuisance properties, and sort through ownership and title issues, which can be a quite extensive process. The land bank ordinance was approved in May of 2021. So the focus of our existing land bank is not only on the established central area, that was that map that I showed earlier, but it's also on the underutilized or distressed properties throughout the city. Our current land bank policy focuses on, just to be clear really quick about land banks, it is, just to be distinct, it is distinct from an urban renewal authority, and that the land bank cannot take property away from someone that does not want to sell it. So I wanted to be clear about that. Our current land bank policy focuses on quick property transition, strategic acquisition, and a clear application process. Uh, So that's all the land bank stuff. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the planning variables that affect affordable housing. Obviously, I touched upon our comprehensive plan, the People for Places plan, the land bank, but these are some of the things that we see on a daily basis, on a regular basis, that impacts the layout of communities, how they're formed, how neighborhoods are formed. Um, the first variable is zoning. Zoning regulates land uses and it incorporates certain rights to the landowner. It's administered by the local government, in this case, the Metropolitan Area Planning Department. Just a brief history. Prior to the late 1940s, there was no single family zoning. Obviously, it's come to dominate our current landscape. With the rise of the American automobile industry, we saw more incremental changes to our neighborhoods, resulting in less density, greater housing variety. Many of the areas in the central Wichita area, they're zoned TF3. Which is a district intended to accommodate moderate density single family and duplex residential development, as well as very limited density multifamily development and other complementary uses. So that's the definition of TF3. That's typically what you find in the core of the city. So again, staying on the theme of zoning, why do we have it? What are the benefits? There are design benefits to zoning, particularly the efficient use of infrastructure and community resources, as well as an intentional design or layout of our community. There are opponents to zoning that claim that it creates a higher per unit land cost and longer car trips. The thought being that when we push things closer together, it not only lowers these costs, but it also lowers the impact on our environment, lets us use less land to accommodate our growing population, and lowers the cost of delivering municipal services. I'm going to talk a little bit about missing middle housing. This refers to the whole spectrum of homes in between single family houses and large apartment dwellings. You can see on the screen there, what you typically see in Wichita that's being developed these days are detached single family homes. All the way at the other end of the spectrum is a mid-rise. But what I'm going to discuss a little bit about are those missing middle homes, duplexes, triplex, and fourplex, courtyard apartments, bungalow courts, townhouses. I'll go through the benefits of some of those structures very quickly. Duplex, I know we're all pretty familiar with this. It's quite common in the Wichita area, especially in the central area. They are two connected dwellings with separate utilities. Here are some examples. Obviously, they can range in terms of design, but they can be pretty unique. They can be disguised as single family homes. Here's a couple slides. These are duplexes within the Wichita central area. Obviously, these are pretty well disguised as single family homes, but they are duplexes. They are mixed in with our current single family housing stock. Here's another great example. Obviously, when you are driving through to the naked eye, you can't tell that this is a duplex, but they do commingle and co-harmonize with our single family housing stock. Townhouses, they are multi-unit. They have shared walls. That picture at the bottom right is on Route 10 over by Uptown Landing near the College Hill area. So obviously, townhouse development is something that we see that is prevalent in the Wichita area. There are several benefits to them: enhanced and compatible designs, increased supply of walkable housing, and it provides for an efficient use of land. Typically, they are more dense, so basically, folks who are looking for homes generally have the ability to move into areas that are denser. Here is an example of townhouses in Wichita. This is one is on East 17th Street. Zoning, accessory apartments, accessory dwelling units. I know this is a common topic throughout the country, but as well as locally. There is a lot of discussion about turning dwelling units or structures or homes above garages, mother-in-law suite into a living, um, a living place to live. There are benefits to them. Obviously, they share utilities with the main house. Um, a lot of the same benefits exist between these and townhouses as well. It does increase the supply of walkable housing, and it is an efficient use of land. Here are some examples. These are just certain designed homes that can be that you can see as an example. I believe this one is in College Hill. It's a carriage house located above a garage. Again, quite discreet. So a lot of these are located in that central area of Wichita. Another option, another variable, again, in planning that could contribute to affordable housing is more compact lots. Generally, you see these less than 5,000 square feet. They're typically less than 50 feet wide. Obviously, the goal here being that it takes up less space. I've talked about the benefits of those. They share a lot of the same benefits with a lot of the other missing middle housing types that I've discussed thus far. I want to shift gears to transportation briefly. Transportation and affordable housing are intertwined and they must be considered together. People often need to be able to pay their rent or their mortgage, but they also need to be able to afford to get to work. If you live on the outskirts of town, you're going to have to spend a lot more money on gas. When you have a shorter commute or even better, no commute, it makes a huge difference in your quality of life. I will say that as far as expanding transportation options, the city of Wichita is currently developing our new bicycle plan. We haven't updated the plan since 2013, so it's a good time to jump back in there. The plan itself will include a citywide bicycle network and then prioritize locations for bicycle infrastructure improvements. And then finally, parking requirements. Regarding parking requirements, typically if you're building a larger building or if it's new construction, the cost of the parking is often passed on to eventual renters or buyers. Typically for smaller buildings on a smaller lot, parking can become prohibitive. It can require a disproportionate share of the lot to accommodate it. In a neighborhood with missing middle housing options, existing on-street parking is almost always adequate for those who need space for their cars. Not always, it's taken on a case-by-case basis, but that pretty much wraps up my presentation. Obviously, I discussed a couple different things, the land bank, a little bit of history, but also, again, those are variables that we certainly consider as a planning department. I wouldn't say we advocate for any of those specifically, but those are the factors that come into play when we're looking at affordable housing in the planning department. Sure.
Great job for jumping right in, just a couple months into your time here as well. That's a lot of the background, and I know especially those who have served on the Wichita Land Bank have touched up against those, but we thought it was extremely valuable to bring that greater context and that history to this meeting. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our next guest, and that is Troy Anderson, our Assistant City Manager of Economic Development. Now, I've heard pieces of this presentation before, and it is just really great background about the differences between what we look at in a housing and market-based versus affordable housing within the housing department. And so, thank you, Troy.
Thanks, Sarah. Again, introductions quickly. My name's Troy Anderson. I'm Assistant City Manager here. My role responsibility is in and around economic development, development services. So we work closely with housing, building, planning. And before I go through the presentation, I want to make a note. Justin and I have honestly never worked together before, so welcome. And also, we did not collaborate, but ironically, you're going to see a lot of the same information. And it just goes to speak into how well we have kind of thought through some of this stuff, that there is some history and there are some goals and some objectives that we're trying to accomplish. This isn't just coming from any one of us, right? That there's been this consistent theme. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right in. So as it relates to economic development, we often talk about urban growth, right? When we talk about urban growth, primarily we're focused around things like urban infill, right? There's some planning trends that we're seeing across the nation over the last couple of decades, right? Touched a little bit about early on automobile and urban sprawl, right? We're now seeing cities across the nation kind of come back to a much more dense urban environment. We have challenges here locally associated with urban infill, right? And so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some of that stuff. But when we talk about urban growth, we talk about it in three aspects, right? Comparatively to the three-legged stool, right? The goals and objectives that we are trying to accomplish, and those are laid out throughout the comprehensive plan, and we're going to touch on some of that stuff. So are we accomplishing the goals and objectives? And then how do we come alongside private development with public investment to try and incentivize and encourage and help make these things happen? But then again, at the end of the day, none of this happens without private investment. We'll kind of show how that goes together. So goals and objectives. Again, first and foremost, we start with the community investment plan, right? That's that overarching umbrella that every city in the state has to adopt a comprehensive plan. This is ours. Specifically within that community investment plan is an urban infill strategy. That urban infill strategy is right in places for people. Ironic, there's some really good information that was provided to us years ago in places for people that we have actually gleaned from over the last several months and years, right, to really kind of shift where our priorities and our focuses are. We gave a presentation to City Council a couple months ago, focusing our efforts on areas such as nodes and corridors rather than districts. And if you're interested in going and hearing that presentation, that was a really informative discussion with City Council to kind of talk about how we're shifting some of our philosophies around public investment. Also within that Places for People, there was a neighborhood investment framework, right? We couched a lot of this around there's a place for free market development and where that occurs, right? And as you see free market development occur, you start to see this adjacency momentum, right? And that's where we come alongside with those publicans. So rather than trying to go out into an environment where you're not seeing that free market investment, it's kind of trying to throw a pebble into the ocean, right? As opposed to you're seeing the free market investment and you come alongside that and now it just becomes a snowball effect, right? And now you see community development. All of that information is available in that Places for People. There's some really good information. Page 62 of that page, some really good information on how we see community development actually occur. Also, we see on that same page, right, the evolution of how we revitalize neighborhoods. Again, there was some really good information in there. And so it took us a little while to embrace that, right? But over the last several months, years, we've begun to really embrace that and incorporate that into our policies and procedures. We've talked about those areas that are formative, emerging, flourishing, and maturing, and how we can move those districts from one area to the next by using the strategies in the previous slide. This is just an illustration from that Places for People plan showing those various districts and how we maybe have previously focused our strategies around areas. So for example, Chris talked about that urban infill strategy, right? The incentive program is to waive building permit fees and reimburse landfill costs. We focused it on those formative districts, right? And what we realized through the data over the evaluation of the last 2 years is that it's not moving the needle, right? Instead, if we use the previous philosophies and we come alongside free market development, right, we're going to start to see that adjacency momentum idea come to life. So that's where we're trying to make some adjustments in how we come alongside and take public investment and help to encourage urban growth and urban infill. As you heard about zoning codes, subdivision codes, site development codes, building codes, property management code, these are all those kind of high level goals and objectives that are we trying to meet these, and are we trying to move the needle as it relates to our overarching goals and objectives? Okay, with that being said, now comes the public investment side, right? And what are the tools that we have in the toolbox? The first thing we have to start differentiating, right, are a couple of different aspects. Number one is housing price. I'm going to talk through that. Housing stock. I'm going to talk through that. And housing type. I'm going to talk through that a little bit. But so the first one, housing price. We have to start trying to all speak the same language, right? It's really easy for folks to throw around the term affordable housing, right? You're going to hear it all over. You're going to hear it in the media. But understand that when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about a very small market. So we're talking about housing that is subsidized, right? That's the world, and that's the department that Housing and Community Services lives in all day, every day. But it's really a small market segment, right? What folks are primarily saying when they say affordable housing, generally, some people are really specifically talking about affordable housing. Generally, they're talking about housing affordability, right? What's affordable to one individual or family is not necessarily affordable to another family or individual, right? So we're going to try to differentiate a little bit between affordable housing. That's the term that's used by U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's based on things like area median income, fair market rents. How development occurs associated with affordable housing can often be achieved through low-income housing tax credits. Again, it's subsidized. This is where in a previous presentation we segued into housing, and they kind of gave a whole presentation on. I'm going to skip over a little bit because I want to get to some of the free market come alongside and incentives that we're going to offer. But within housing, community development block grant dollars, home investment, we have home ARPA. You all have heard these presentations before. Community development leads to infrastructure improvements in high priority funding areas. Here's the whole community development block grant program. Project vouchers. And this is where we segue back to development services. So I don't want to steal from it. If you have some questions regarding housing, Sally and her team, they can walk you through all of that. The ones I want to talk through are those public funds where we come alongside and we talk about how we make housing more affordable, right? With rising cost of construction, with interest rates where they are, with challenges associated with labor, right? These development projects are becoming exponentially harder and harder to realize. So what are the tools that we have in our toolbox? Whether it's the tools that we have in our toolbox or the tools that other cities and other states have in their toolbox, for all intents and purposes, they're categorized broadly in the same conversation, right? We have property tax exemption, whatever acronym you want to call that, right? We have property tax rebates. We have sales tax exemptions. We have sales tax rebates. We have special assessments, which this community uses a lot. I'll leave it at that. We also have fee waivers and expense reimbursements, right? And so these are all tools that generally across every city and state have at their disposal. More specifically, there's a state program called CID, it's called Community Improvement District. We'll walk through that a little bit here. We have IRBs, Industrial Revenue Bonds. That's actually a federal program. We have a program called NRA. It's a Neighborhood Revitalization Area. It's actually a program that we had in effect several years ago that got shelved. We're actually in the process of trying to dust that off, retool it. We're working closely with the school district to try and implement that. But it's going to take buy-in from the school district and the county. And so that's one we're hoping to add back into our toolbox here in the near future. TIF, tax increment financing, again, special assessments. And then, so here's kind of a matrix of how those two merge together, right? So for example, a CID, right, offers a sales tax rebate and a special assessment. An IRB offers a property tax exemption and a sales tax exemption. Neighborhood revitalization area offers a property tax rebate. And so we use this matrix because not every project can use all of these tools, right? You can't use an incentive program that exempts the taxes and then use that taxes to pay back a rebate back to the developer for the purposes of eligible expenses, right? Because there's no taxes being paid, right? So some of these programs don't work together. And so every project's going to be a little bit different and a little bit unique. A development might get brought to our attention and they say, hey, this is the gap that we're looking to try and fill. And we try to help them figure out which tool in the toolbox is best to help respond to that. Okay, so a little bit more in-depth community improvement district, adding additional retail sales tax to a district, 1 to 2%. That sales tax is then returned back to the developer to reimburse them for eligible expenses. It can be used for commercial, industrial, or mixed-use projects. The CID tax can also be used to pay a wide range of capital development costs and certain ongoing operation costs. There's also an element, we've yet to see it used. We got some folks that are trying to figure out how to implement it, but programming is certainly an eligible expense under the CID law. CIDs may then impose a retail sales tax up to 2% or special assessment tax for up to 22 years. Okay, industrial revenue bonds. Oftentimes we see these utilized along with low-income housing tax credits, specifically in downtown redevelopment. As it relates to low-income housing tax credits, the 4% LIHTC credits are awarded through the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. Most developers issue bonds through Kansas Development Finance Authority. The one interesting, Peter, we can also issue these bonds, which makes the city of Wichita a little more competitive than other cities in Kansas. In fact, we prefer to be the issuer on the LIHTC projects. And what that does is adds a sales tax exemption, which KDFA cannot. So under the IRB program, all of your construction costs, commodities, furniture, fixture, equipment can all be eligible for a sales tax exemption. So at 7.5% on a project becomes real money real fast. We also see industrial revenue bonds used downtown for redevelopment on a number of projects. Again, we offer that sales tax exemption, rehabilitation of properties. Not going to get into the rest of that. Neighborhood revitalization, I told you a little bit about this, right? We're working with school districts. This was a program where once the property taxes are paid, that property tax increase that is realized based on improvements to the property can be rebated back to the property owner, the homeowner. And again, we had this program in effect years ago. For whatever reason, school district and county pulled out, and so we shelved the project. Again, we're going to try and dust that off here in the near future, repackage that, limit it geographically, again, coming alongside adjacency momentum in those nodes and corridors. So we're limiting the impact, but again, trying to provide another tool, but that's based on a rebate program back to the property owner. We have special assessment programs. For those of you that are not familiar with special assessments are bonds that are sold by the city and that can then be put back into a project. And then once those bonds are sold and put to a project, then we assess the property. We basically lien the property and increase a tax obligation. And so as you're paying your property taxes, you're also paying those special assessments. The reason why folks take advantage of this is generally they can get a more favorable interest rate. Governments have exponentially better interest rates, particularly with bonds as opposed to the free market. So we try to be very careful with these because these are oftentimes backed by the general fund and taxpayer dollars. So we got to be really, really careful with these. But this is a really powerful tool because several points on an interest rate can be the difference in getting a project realized. And then last but not least, even again, we've kind of have a program in place right now where we are able to waive fees and expense reimbursements. We have the urban infill program right now. Again, it hasn't moved the needle. We're trying to figure out how to retool that around the geography. But something else, here's my teaser, right? We're actually looking at trying to introduce a fee waiver program for those LIHTC projects that have been applied for through the state. For whatever reason, the state finds fee waivers, especially with building permit fees, really, really attractive and really increases the score on LIHTC applications. So we're looking to try and package something like that here in the near future. There's also a program, the RHID, Reinvestment Housing Incentive District. This was originally a rural housing incentive district that Kansas rolled out. They've since retooled that. They're now calling it the Reinvestment Housing Incentive District. We've looked into it. We're really trying to figure out kind of where it fits within it. For all intents and purposes, it works almost exactly the same as TIF, except that you can extend the term through 25 years, not 20 years. So it gives you another 5-year payout. but it really puts the number of projects in a box. And so again, it's another tool in the toolbox, but we're trying to figure out how and where that works best. There's that program. I won't believe it. Okay, housing stock. So we talked about sort of the difference between affordable housing and housing and affordability, and how we can come alongside and help housing become more affordable, right? But we also then have to take that next conversation and go, well, what kind of housing are we talking about, right? We can talk about building new housing, right? But again, with cost of construction and availability of labor, preservation of existing housing stock is also there's some really good statistics. There's some really interesting statistics around. I think there was like 17,000 housing units that we have vacant in our community today, right? So, and again, that fluctuates on any given day, right? But if you had 17,000 housing units that were vacant in your housing stock today, and if you only had to put $20, $30, $50,000 into those housing units, right, to get those back to a livability standard. One of the biggest things we found with existing housing stock, right, is it's aging, it's unlivable, it's need even major investment and repair, right? But $20, $30, $50,000 to preserve an existing housing unit versus spending $150,000 to $200,000 creating a new housing unit, you can see how much further that public investments can go. So we want to balance that, right? It's not just about, we can't build our way out of this, right? We also have to preserve our existing housing stock, and that's what that section of presentation is all about. There's some other, again, good slides around. Kansas did a housing study, and there's some really about the market segments of what type of housing, when, where, and how, and the incomes associated, and what we really are looking for to try to fill that gap. But again, I won't belabor it. That's a whole nother conversation for another time. The last part is, again, we did not collaborate on this, right? Low density versus high density. Missing middle housing. So one of the things that we heard is throughout places for people and otherwise, right? We do that detached single family house stuff really, really well, right? We have an abundance of single family housing. It's the American dream, right? You want to own that single family home with the white picket fence. And so for decades, urban sprawl, right? And we just kept building single family residential. Again, now we're at a point where we're realizing through good data and good statistics, right, that not everybody wants to own a home, right? Not everybody can afford a home, right? Housing, not just housing affordability, right? But folks who are entering the housing market can't even necessarily qualify, even if they wanted a single family, right? So now you get into that whole missing middle. We can do the really good mid-rise stuff too, even though that's a focus and an emphasis, right? But where we're really going to try and concentrate over the years to come is sort of that everything in between, right? Taking advantage of urban infill, taking advantage of transportation, taking advantage of the existing infrastructure such as roads and water and sewer and walkability and those kind of things. So missing middle housing will definitely be something we focus on. Okay, coming back to none of this works though without private investment. We're not going to go out there and do this on our own. That's not what cities do, right? We come alongside private investment and we try to help encourage them and help fill the gaps to the greatest extent possible without compromising and being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. None of this happens without private investment. Otherwise, the stool doesn't stand up. And with that being said, that concludes my presentation. I'll be around for questions, but otherwise, I'll hand it back to Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you. I've heard of a professor who used to say, if it's repeated, it's probably important. And so that might be the theme of the day. There's a lot of content that you're going to hear over and over from different angles and different people as we keep on going further. And so I'd like to introduce Sally Stang, the Director of Housing and Community Services. She's going to share a presentation on kind of the overview of the department. At the end of Sally's presentation, we will have a 15-minute break. For those in the room, that's a good time for conversation and questions. And then we'll come back for just a little bit more after that. So thank you, Sally, and welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to be here. We know this is information overload. This is the number 4th department to come forward, and yes, there is value in repeating because we did not collaborate at all. No, you'll see some references. This really just is giving you an idea of what happens in the housing department. And this presentation actually came at a request from doing another presentation that said, before you get into that topic, we really want to see what is it all that happens in the housing department. And I said, I could put together a couple slides. It's like, I don't know, 10 slides. I'm like, holy cow. Okay, let's quantify all this. So a lot of people don't realize that the housing department actually does multiple roles. So the housing, obviously, in the housing department, we have the Public Housing Authority. That housing authority has the jurisdiction, though, of Sedgwick County, Butler County, and Harvey County outside the city of Newton. So as we talk about plan, when I'm talking with a plan MABCD or MAPD, they're talking Sedgwick County. When we're talking economic development, we're talking the city. When I'm talking PHA, we're talking 3 counties. So, and it has a program year of January to December. Similar to the city, love it when those program years align, nothing else does. We're also the Community Action Agency. So if you've heard WISCAP, we love our acronyms, the Wichita Sedgwick County Community Action Partnership. And that jurisdiction is all of Sedgwick County. And its program year is April of one year to September of the next. It's actually 18 months long. It drives me absolutely batty that they call that the program year. We have periods, April to September, where we have 2 program years going at the same time. That is health and funding from the Department of Health and Human Services, and it's all about alleviating poverty. And we're also the Community Development Administrator for the HUD programs. Its jurisdiction is only the city of Wichita, and its program year runs July to June. So we are always in a planning and reporting phase for some aspect of this. In addition to that, we do several other things. We have multiple funding sources: HUD, HHS, DOJ, KHRC, Sedgwick County, and the city of Wichita. Okay, every one of them has different rules on procurement, on reporting, on timelines, so you can imagine we are a little bit crazy all the time. And then I provided the budget for the last 5 years just to show. In 2019, we were at a budget of 27 million. What happened in 2020? COVID. We doubled our budget by 2022, and we were asked to deploy millions of dollars in resources very, very quickly, and with very little support from the funding agencies. Just get it out quickly and then we will torture you later, was pretty much the way they came about. We are now settling back down into normal funding ranges, but again, even 2023, our budget was 35 million, significantly still above where we were in 2019. So instead of looking at, because we are so complicated, when I first came into the department about 4 years ago, my number 1 goal was silo busting. Because you can imagine we're doing all these different things. Everybody worked in their silo. They could be working in a cubicle next to someone doing very similar work for a different grant and never talk about it, never collaborate. So it has been silo busting within the department for 4 years. And so as I put together this listing of activities out of housing, I very deliberately busted those silos. I am not doing this by funder, it's really about what is the service we're providing. So rent assistance programs, we have it in many different funding realms. I'm not going to read them to you here, but the big one everyone knows, and it's the biggest piece of our budget at about 23 million of the budget, is the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, where we're providing rent assistance. And there are multiple facets of that, and you see them all listed here. In addition, we own 226 properties that we converted, or not properties, units in 4 properties that we converted from public housing under RAD. It's now a multifamily Section 8 project. It has a Section 8 contract now, but we have a development partner, and we did a $37 million renovation, and 3 of the 4 buildings are complete at this time, where we still have the 4th one to go. So very exciting means to convert. That left us with 352 single-family homes. I have 345 here because we've started to sell them, right? So we've actually closed on 7. We've got several more closings scheduled. We have more open houses scheduled. And we are going through the process of selling the remaining inventory to reinvest in more affordable housing that is under a different subsidy platform and is more efficient to maintain and manage. But we also have homeowner assistance programs. So we have vouchers under the Section A program that can be used actually to pay people's mortgages. It's very, very powerful program. There's a very slim group of people that can qualify. They have to be able to qualify for a mortgage, but still qualify for voucher subsidy. Very slim. We have a few, but it's out there. It's a resource. We use housing development funding to build infill housing with our partners we talked about, right? Habitat for Humanity, Jacob's Ladder, Mennonite Housing. So that's another homeowner assistance program because they're building infill housing for homeownership. We layer that with homeownership $80. It's a down payment assistance program to get people's mortgages to being 80% of value so that they can avoid mortgage insurance and afford the units that they're in. We have a home repair program. Press release today. We are relaunching the home repair program. I'm very excited about it. In the past, we had a $5,000 cap. It was a grant so long as the person stayed in the unit for 5 years. But that $5,000 cap's been the cap forever, right? What can you do today and have any real impact for $5,000? Now, there is reasons it was capped at 5,000 because once we pass that, even still today, we enter the whole lead paint abatement evaluation, but we think it's still worth it to open it up. So that program will, the application, the online application is opening February 1st. It was announced today. We wanted to make sure we did enough marketing ahead of the opening to be fair to all households who want to apply for assistance. So that February 1st, they'll be able to apply for that. And we will now leverage both the there's still a $5,000 grant component, but the ability to do $25,000. That the remaining 20 would be carried as a 0% for deferred mortgage on the property until the property changes hands, with a 10% match on that 20,000. So it just expands the ability of that program. We have a home improvement, home equity loan where we can buy down the interest rate so that if someone has a bigger project, they could actually go for a home equity line of credit and we can use subsidies to buy down that interest rate to try and make that more affordable. We have a historic loan program. We don't get a lot of interest here. We don't have a lot of low income households who own historic properties. I'm not saying it hasn't been used, but it doesn't get used often and people should know that it's there, right, as a possibility. We also have a rental rehab loan program. So we have, this one is a low interest installment loan though, for owners of rental properties who lease to low income residents and take voucher holders. That's how we can confirm that, but it allows them to reinvest at a low interest rate into their unit. We also have individual and family support programs. So we call it IFD. It is comprehensive case management where we work with families to assist them in getting out of poverty. It's about job training, educational goals, anything we can do to help raise people up. We also have, which includes an emergency assistance portion of that. So people who are engaged in IFD can get emergency assistance for rent, utilities, medicine, those kind of things. We are often paying for workwear, steel-toe boots and scrubs and things people need in order to work or to be trained to work. We have a family self-sufficiency program, comprehensive case management specifically for housing choice voucher participants, but it works kind of hand in hand like the IFD program, spelled out though by HUD, is only limited to those households. And then we work with the cash program to create IDA accounts to help people with matching funds that often are used to build their down payment towards buying a home. With a way to work summer youth education and employment program. So each summer we do 150 to 200 youth. They can apply for this program in which we provide them training for the soft skills and then place them in jobs all around the city where we pay their wages. Talk about a win-win. So we're working with nonprofits, government agencies, and small businesses and can place a student in that role. They work about 20 hours a week and we pay the wages. They get good learning experience and mentors, try to make them employable going into the future. We fund programs and have a medical and prescription service program we do with Project Access to be able to do those for uninsured households. And then we fund summer camp scholarships in Park and Rec. So for kids who, low-income families who want to attend a Park and Rec summer camp but can't afford to, we provide funding to let them do that. Still not done. Homeless programs. We do a lot in homelessness, honestly, and in the last year, I'd say 40% of my time is in homelessness. We have the Housing First program that's been around since 2009 that is geared towards providing rental subsidies for chronically homeless individuals. We have a social worker internship program that is helping to provide support to those folks and other programs too. HomeARP is the MAC, if you've heard about it. HomeARP is funding we receive from HUD specifically for the development of housing and other services to serve those in homelessness. And the plan moving forward is to build a multi-agency campus to include congregate housing, non-congregate housing, multi-agency service center, and housing units. So that project has really blown up right now. We are actively moving forward and narrowing down on site selection so that we can get that rolling this year. We do rapid rehousing in our department. That's when someone who's experiencing homelessness needs just a couple, 3 months maybe to get back on their feet. Lost a job, had a divorce, whatever, caused them to fall into homelessness, but can be remedied quickly. Project Hope is a Department of Justice grant we applied for and were awarded. And it is really tied to evaluating the cross-section of homelessness and crime in communities, and where we are hypothesizing that in our target area, if we can reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness, we can reduce the number of crimes and calls for services from law enforcement. It's kind of fascinating. We also fund the local shelters and outreach services. So almost every homeless shelter in the community is right now receiving funding through our department. We fund homeless prevention services. So Salvation Army and Center of Hope both provide emergency rent assistance for people facing eviction, and we provide funding for that. And we fund operations at the studios at Humankind. Not done yet. Community development program. So we have small business assistance through the Propel program. So we added money to the Propel program for CDBG eligible small businesses. The dangerous and unsafe structure program through MABCD. So when they have a qualifying property that needs to be torn down, some of that funding comes through us and CDBG. We do infrastructure improvement projects like sidewalks and drainage improvements. We can do bus shelters. We can do all kinds of fun stuff like that. We do public facility improvements. So we just last year finished the conversion of the Dunbar Theater into a community center, so that they can still work for their full renovation going forward, and do their fundraising to try and do their full-on improvement to that property. But in the meantime, all of that work that was done there to convert that was done through CDBG and through our office. We also fund the operations of the community resource centers. Most people don't realize that. So Atwater, Colvin, and Evergreen, the funding for all 3 of those neighborhood resource centers are from CDBG and come through our office. We fund youth crime prevention programs, domestic violence victims programs. The Wichita Land Bank's funding is CDBG coming and coordinated through us, as well as the Affordable Housing Fund. So if you count those, we have 39 different programs that we're running with 60 people. So that's, we're always hopping. We're always looking for ways to leverage opportunities, leverage funding sources to try and make the biggest impact to the community. So that's the overall of the Housing and Community Services Department.
Well, a quick, fun, personal story to cap that. I heard this presentation about 2 years ago and was in a role that was enjoying, but kind of looking for what's my next step. And lo and behold, after hearing this presentation, I came to work for Sally. So if you heard that and you were inspired, you might just be in the right place. With that in mind, we'll take a 15-minute break. We'll come back about 2:40. For those in person, this is a good time to ask questions, get clarification, things like that. For those online, I am going to go ahead and mute the mic, and we will resume about 2:40. So thank you so much. There has been some wonderful conversation going on, but we are just about to the time that we promised we would resume. And so I want to begin to call us back to order. I'm going to go ahead and resume sharing my screen. And part of the purpose of this meeting was to create these networking opportunities. So I'm so glad that we had that chance. Would anyone online be able to confirm that they can hear us and that everything is back to full meeting operations?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that confirmation. Okay, and we are back, and so want to share just a little bit about where we are headed. In many ways, we're just getting started, especially with the projects that are really shepherded by the boards that are present here today. And so I want to share that, bringing a program or a project into existence is exciting, but I'm so much more excited about the compounded impact as we begin to move the needle with these projects. So again, if it's repeated, it's probably important. You're going to hear some repeat information here, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the programs within the real property section that really focuses on affordable housing units, separate from client services or some of the other services that Sally outlined. All of those are so important, but the focus of a lot of this work is on those units. So the real property section was created in 2022. This was really part of the outgrowth of the Wichita Land Bank, the Housing and Community Services Department getting a couple of new programs, looking at some department reorganization. And so they began to pair together some programs that hadn't been paired together before. And so the mission of the real property section is to develop, maintain, and sustain safe, healthy, and affordable housing units in the city of Wichita. We have 5 key program areas, and we do this with approximately 12 staff members. And then the work of both the boards that are present here today falls within this area. And so Sally and Troy both touched on this earlier, but we operate the Housing Development Loan Program. This comes out of our city's entitlement home funding source. And so that funding source can be used for a few key housing initiatives, including subsidies for developments and builds of homes, and also for assisting with affordable home ownership, such as down payment assistance. And so this, the Housing Development Loan Program, or HDLP as we call it, is used to create affordable housing. We have 2 components. One is single family home ownership, and we do max the subsidy per unit out at $90,000 per unit. This really helps us to do what would not be possible without that subsidy. If you look at infill development that we use this program for, you might spend $225,000 building a single family home that might appraise out at $150,000 under current market conditions. The private market will not do that. And so that's where this program can come in and can continue to use those resources that Troy and Justin mentioned earlier. The infrastructure is already there, and so reinvigorating the core areas is a key part of that program. We also have the multifamily rental, where we max at $200,000 per development. For many programs, this can assist as part of a greater funding stack. Troy talked about the 4% tax credits. We actually have recently had several conversations about 9% tax credits, which are extremely competitive. And so developers are really looking for that local investment and those extra subsidies that just help to build that greater stack. And so that program does have long-term affordability and monitoring. Members of the Affordable Housing Review Board have become familiar with both of these programs over the past few months, as they are the board that reviews these applications and makes recommendations. And applications are currently open. We manage these on a rolling cycle, and we are currently working on 2022 funds. Also, out of the home funding source, we have our down payment assistance program. It has traditionally been called Home Ownership 80 because we assist with 20% to bring that down to 80% that's still owed on that mortgage. As Sally mentioned, this eliminates the need for private mortgage insurance, which we know adds a premium to the expense and is especially affected if somebody doesn't have a stellar credit score. And so that can be the slight difference between that house falling within an affordable arena for that household or them being priced out. We look to make sure that when somebody is coming through the homeownership 80 program, that their, we call it PITI, principal, interest, tax, and insurance payment should not exceed 31% of the household income. And so we pair this program with our down payment, or I'm sorry, with our HDLP for single family home ownership, because it helps to then get a qualified household into that unit that we have helped build. They are expected to remain in that unit for 10 years. At that point, half of the down payment assistance is forgiven, and then the remainder will be paid on sale or transfer of the unit. And so one of the components of my area that we don't really talk about because it doesn't fit cleanly in a program is that we, in many ways, are a mortgage service. We manage a fairly extensive loan portfolio, as you'll hear as we get further into the programs. And so this is one of our loan types that we offer. And let's see, I mentioned that we pair it with single family home ownership projects. We also are looking at leveraging this with the Affordable Housing Fund. And so this is part of where I'm going in my presentation is what are the tools and then how do we use them to build really neat things. With the Affordable Housing Fund, we want to make sure that those investments have long-term affordability restrictions as well, because we don't want to throw away the public resources on things that we don't monitor and insure. And so as I mentioned earlier, the city underwrites, we look for compliance with our loans, but the applications are not completed through the city. They are completed through developer partners for Home 80. A second long-standing program we have is home improvement, home repair. For those on the Wichita Land Bank, you've heard us talk about community development block grant. You've heard about some of the challenges with that funding source. Home improvement is a key arena within the CDBG funding source. This program is designed really to stabilize homeowners in their unit of residence. We know that if things start going wrong with the house, it can quickly compound. A roof that leaks can create structural and envelope issues and start to really cause decline and deterioration. And so we want to intervene before it gets to the point where that unit ends up in Chris's arena or becomes unlivable, uninhabitable. We do assist with critical repairs for existing affordable housing units, and that also benefits the city because it helps to preserve that affordable housing stock. I know there was a mention of if we can invest a smaller amount in maintaining a unit, that is so much less expensive than building a new unit, as our Affordable Housing Review Board has learned while vetting proposals for new unit developments. Now, we have fully revamped the program. Our application will reopen February 1st. We are starting marketing efforts again for ensuring that there is really fair access to the program. When that application opens, it will be an online application. We will immediately be building a wait list, and that will be based on how critical is that need and a point scoring system that we've developed that also considers other priorities and includes past use of the program and some other considerations. So our classic home repair program has been up to $5,000 in forgivable assistance for basic repairs. At this point in time, we can still do things such as fixing a water service line that has deteriorated and broken so that somebody can have potable water. We can assist with things like water heater replacements. But we've started getting into situations where somebody calls for a furnace and we go out and we discover, oh, well, they actually need an electrical upgrade. And you cannot do the electrical upgrade and the furnace and stay under the $5,000 limit. And so we would do the electrical upgrade one year, we do the furnace the next year, and just to cap it off, we do the AC the next year. And so we've just run 3 programs, we've deployed staff 3 times, a lot of inefficiencies with that, and we're not really addressing the core need. And so we started looking at how do we work within HUD's lead paint guidelines and laws to deliver more at one time. And so we were able to purchase what's called an XRF gun. It allows us to analyze paint to determine if there is a lead risk present. If there is, we get into a lot of things that we have to do. If there's not, we are free and clear to go and spend up to $25,000 to do comprehensive work. The 5,000 threshold will remain forgivable. That's a core component of the program, and it's very popular. It allows us to keep that household in the unit for the 5-year forgiveness period, and then the mortgage is released. If they don't stay for 5 years, we do collect on sale or transfer, but the goal is to prevent flipping. The goal is to stabilize the household that's already there. And so then if they exceed 5,000, the additional assistance will be secured with a 0% deferred loan payable upon sale or transfer. We analyzed this and really felt like that's a way to bring these CDBG funds back into housing, put them back out in the community. I tell people, if you're familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey talks about, the money's not here, it's in your house, in your house, in your house. And so those funds are living in many different units in the community and will get to come back in and do the work again once the homeowners are done with those units. We also do want to see more homeowner buy-in. We want there to be a sense that this is not just free money. And so projects beyond 5,000 will require a 10% match. Now, if somebody maxes at 25,000, that's going to be a $2,000 match. We will work with program staff. Basically, when we get a call, program staff will evaluate what are the needs in the household, and they'll build a spec for the whole project. And then they'll work with the homeowner to determine what is critical, what is affordable. We're not going to force anybody to do work that they can't afford to do, but we are going to try to maximize benefit in that one opportunity, because we also don't want to have homeowners come back the next year and the next year. That limits the availability of that resource for others throughout the community. And so we are going to require people to have that 5-year forgiveness period fulfilled before they're eligible to come back for additional funds. At that point, even if they have that deferred loan, they will be eligible again after 5 years, up to a lifetime max of $40,000. Project types include water service line leaks or water line repiping. We want potable water in households. If we have sewer line leaks or collapses, then Chris doesn't like that very well. So we want to help with those because those impact the whole neighborhood. Electrical shorts or updates. We don't want houses to burn down because of poor wiring. Water heater replacements, accessibility. If somebody can't get into their bathroom, we can come in and assist with widening the doorway, replacing the tub for a shower, things that allow people to stay in the home. With our higher threshold, we can once again assist with roof replacements, and we will consider other project requests, but they really need to fall in that replacement category and affect health, safety, or preservation of the unit. To qualify, we have 5 key things that must be met. They must be the owner of record on the deed. We know that there are some small pots of legal assistance funds to help remedy that in certain districts. We do try to refer people toward resources if we know that they would be eligible. They must live in the home. This is not a secondary home. This is not you rent this unit and live somewhere else. We're going to try to verify that they abide there. Property taxes must be current. We don't want to see a unit that we assist turn around and end up in the tax sale in the next couple of years. That's a really poor use of our resources and doesn't succeed in keeping that homeowner in their home. Similarly, we are requiring homeowners insurance. We had previously required that and lapsed at a point, and we felt like that was not good policy. It does not really protect the homeowner and ensure that they're stable in their home. So we do want to see homeowners insurance, and they must be at or below 80% of the area median income, and that's based on household size. Projects will be assigned to our wait list based on exigent health and safety scoring. And we've also chosen to prioritize active code violations. If we can work together to remedy those, everybody benefits, the neighborhood, the homeowner, the community. We also know this year that we have Some of those electrical to furnace to AC projects may still be lingering out there. And so we want to complete those this year. This is a one-time priority this year that multi-phase projects would be completed. Special thing that we're adding, and we will begin marketing, is that if somebody has purchased one of the Wichita Housing Authority single-family units, they'll be eligible for these funds if they're in that unit for home ownership. We know that some of those units need some love and they need some updates. And so somebody could apply for up to $25,000 through us rather than having to go to the bank for a loan. We've also written in a provision for that particular scenario that their purchase price of the house will count as their match under that scenario. So we are really looking for efficiency. We're looking for maximum benefit. And finally, we're working with utilities, which has been working to inventory and identify lead water service lines or water service lines considered galvanized requiring replacement, or GRR. And so once again, this is an area where we're coordinating across departments to achieve greater health priorities. As Sally mentioned, we have the home improvement loan program. This is a mix and match option with what we've just outlined. If somebody has a project that's going to exceed $25,000, we may talk to them about whether they could qualify for this as $5,000 worth of their project instead of $5,000 in hard costs. That actually takes their project total up to $40,000 if they need it. Similarly, the historical loan program is on the books. I have not seen one yet in my time here, but it is available if there is somebody who is trying to preserve a unit. It is a loan though. And finally, we have the rental rehab loan program. We are not currently accepting applications because we're trying to work to align that program with our home repair program. So there is some comparable resource available between homeowners and landlords. The difference is that the rental rehab program is a loan at a 4% interest rate. And so as interest rates tick up, we have a lot of interest in that program. And so we look forward to opening it back up. A key component that we're going to be moving toward is that they must take a voucher for a minimum of 15 years or the full term of the loan. They can repay for up to 20 years. And so as long as there is CDBG funds in that unit, we want to ensure that they're also meeting the need for voucher assisted units. Okay, a third project is the Wichita Land Bank, and this is funded with Community Development Block Grant funds. The Land Bank acquires, holds, manages, transfers, and conveys challenged properties. We look for really the worst of the worst. It's kind of like Fixer Upper, except it's not the worst house in the best neighborhood. It is the most challenged properties. To look at how do we restore these properties to productive use and benefit the community. The land bank pairs well with HDLP, single family home ownership, because we can take those parcels in, we can work to clear the title issues, we can hold them, manage them, and then get them into development agreements so that they get a single family home back on them. As we've heard from some of our developers, we hear that that impacts public safety calls through reducing the number of police calls. We know that definitely impacts tax receipts for property taxes, which funds public services to those properties. So when we're sitting there with a vacant parcel, we've got a nuisance that we're also really losing opportunity, and that parcel is not paying for itself through public services. So the work of the land bank really is kind of the beginning and the end of many of these processes. Wanted to tell a little bit of story with both the land bank and the Affordable Housing Fund, because those are stories that we're in the middle of writing. And the board for the land bank was appointed in 2021. This began in MAPD and then transferred to housing because of its focus on affordable housing. And that headquarter was reassigned in 2022. And throughout 2022 and 2023, the board and staff have made efforts to acquire parcels. In April of 2023, we did acquire 2 parcels on the northwest corner of 9th and Ash from the city surplus property. And we're currently marketing those parcels for affordable housing. We have heard from several developers, and we do expect to receive an application pretty soon, which will kick off our application review, and hopefully development process is next. So this is really the first property moving through the pilot phase. And so that's the 9th and Ash parcels. We also have been vetting for a little more than 6 months now, a 23-unit apartment complex that has been offered as a donation. We think that this would be a very interesting and CDBG eligible project, but we are still working through a lot of legalities with it. It could be a very good test of the land bank. We don't do anything small or simple. And so this could be an incredible project if it can work. We've also reviewed other parcels, and honestly, that has tested what the land bank can and cannot do. So we are looking at how we refine our operations to do what we've been tasked to do. We discussed in our Land Bank Board of Trustees meeting yesterday that several challenges have emerged during our pilot phase. A big one is that we have not yet been successful at acquiring property through tax sale. Many land banks do receive, roll that back a moment. Many tax sales begin the purchase price at the amount that is owed in delinquent taxes and fees. In Sedgwick County, that purchase price begins at $1. And so many land banks acquire properties that don't sell at tax sale because that delinquent amount is never reached. In Sedgwick County, it is very rare that a parcel does not sell. And as we've had conversations with the treasurer and their attorney who helps with the tax sale, the ruling opinion has been that the market price of properties is what the market will bear, and it is what the market brings in tax sale. And so we are limited in what we can do without actually putting taxpayer funds into the tax sale to redeem taxpayer debt. Additionally, we are limited by the community development block grant funding source. As we've seen, there are many things that can be done with it, but we have to vet every property based on whether it's going to produce an eligible outcome. We've had other properties we've vetted that have high noise levels that would require extensive abatement in a build to really soundproof because of road noises or highways or things like that. And we've run into environmental concerns that have limited many acquisitions we've pursued. Finally, staff capacity. The same staff team is also going to be involved in the launch of the Affordable Housing Fund projects. And so we discussed this with our board yesterday, and we are really going to potentially be moving towards shifting our focus toward advocacy with these obstacles and scaling down some of our, what I would say are operational efforts at this point in time to focus on these obstacles and how do we move through them so that we can operate as we've been tasked. So the next steps with that will be that staff have been tasked with writing a plan for what a suspension would look like for our operations, and then also to look at what will a ramp up look like back into full operations as we make progress in these obstacles. And so wanted to tell a to-the-minute update on the land bank. A fourth program is public housing. This is part of the Wichita Housing Authority. And as Sally mentioned, we started with 352 single-family units. We are officially moving some through the contract and sale price, and that's been very exciting. For the units that are still occupied and our vacant units still in our inventory, we serve as landlord, property manager, and maintenance staff for those 340 some units that are still on our rolls. We also have the 4 apartment units that have been in conversion through the rental assistance demonstration. And as we draw down our public housing operations, we have capital funds that we have received from HUD that we are continuing to invest in some strategic updates so that we can retain those funds in the city of Wichita. Because if we don't spend them here, even at the tail end of the project, they go back to the federal government. And we want to retain every affordable housing resource we can. So with public housing, we have Group 1 has been authorized and we are selling units. We have a total of 37 scattered site units that we've been marketing. We have open houses coming up again, January 21st and 23rd. And we will have a news release going out next week with some additional dates out into the future. We do keep adding inventory as it's ready and available, and we do keep reducing inventory as it gets under contract and into the sales processes. Our group 2, I really want to focus on, and we'll go a little deeper. It is 66 units in 2 cluster areas, one in the northeast part of the city and one in the southwest part. These will be sold via a request for proposal or RFP process, and we will pair them with affordable housing funds, so that basically through the proposal process, somebody can propose to purchase a property, they can propose what funding they are going to need to fix that property up, and they will propose an affordability outcome, whether that's home ownership or whether that's rental. And if they do home ownership, they will use down payment assistance, Home 80, to assist that homeowner in the unit. That's our monitoring trigger. If they choose rental, they can use project-based vouchers, they can use low-income housing tax credits, or any other similar device that ensures affordability for 15 years. And the Affordable Housing Fund, or Affordable Housing Review Board, is the board that will be overseeing this. Works. Group 3 is now at HUD, processing for review, and that's 51 units. Again, scattered site units, no affordability restrictions on that group. And we do have future groups in the works, and we're still working to do some rehabs prior to sale with some of our capital fund funds. We are also looking for affordable home buyers who might be interested in some of these projects. So if you're aware of anybody who is on a limited income but would potentially qualify for a mortgage, these opportunities will be coming available later this spring. And so discussing the group 2, we call them 2AI and 2AII, and sometimes we just say III. 66 units, they are within the established central area. As you've heard from several people, that area really defines a lot of our work. Not that we're exclusive to that area, but it's an area for focused reinvestment. And so it is a strategic opportunity to test the impact of targeted investment in 2 very different neighborhood areas. Group 2AI in Northeast Wichita is 43 units along 25th, 26th, Minnesota Ashenpayet. And then Group 2AII is in Southwest Wichita along Haskell and St. Clair. And here are a couple of map screenshots. No context for where they are, but I'm glad to share these offline as well. And then our 5th and final major program area within my section is the Affordable Housing Fund. That is $5 million. And the goal of the Affordable Housing Fund is to improve the quality of existing housing stock while expanding quality affordable housing options and promoting neighborhood stability in Wichita's core. And so we really are focusing on serving Wichita's minority communities. The vulnerability within minority communities and some of these areas that we're focusing on really came to a head through the COVID pandemic. And so in every way, as we administer this program, we are looking at equitability. We're looking at making sure that minority businesses and contractors can reasonably participate. We're looking at neighborhood stability and just taking a very intentional focus through this program. And once again, you'll see a lot of different maps, but they all have very similar overlays. This is the established central area, and you can see, based on the red lines, areas that were historically considered redlined, or the yellow lines represent areas that historically were considered definitely declining. These are areas that have intergenerational need for that reinvestment that we're focusing on. And so the COVID pandemic showcased these needs. And coming out of that, the council allocated $5 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds to create the Affordable Housing Fund. Now, as we really dug into the guidance, because nothing we do in housing is simple, we discovered that to really run the program as we devised it would potentially put homeowners upside down in their homes for up to 15 years. Because there was a provision that the homeownership affordability period had to be 20 years. And so when we ran the numbers, if they sold sooner than 15 years and had to pay back that assistance and the development subsidies, the cost would be more than what their equity would be. We felt like that was ultimately predatory. That was not how we wanted to proceed. And so we discussed options with our nonprofit partners. It was a fantastic convening of organizations that hadn't really convened previously. Meeting of the minds, but we still didn't really come to any breakthroughs. And so our budget office ended up identifying other qualifying expenses throughout the city for those original funds. And with that, they were able to reallocate that 5 million in general fund through the city. And so we have revamped the program in light of that. We aligned it with existing programs that we have, such as home repair, such as Home 80, to ensure that we have accountability, equity between programs, and that monitoring is as simplified as possible long term. We do still expect to strategically use public housing units, and we still want to look at investment in areas surrounding those units. And so the program serves as that opportunity to test that targeted investment. And as we mentioned before, we have an RFP under development, and we will share more details once we get authorization to sell that group and once we have the RFP finalized. And so eligible uses within the Affordable Housing Fund, we're really looking at rehabilitation right now, but we can also do new construction, and we can also run a program that would be modeled after our home repair program. And so that could be run through the city, it could be run through another developer. We are under a bit of a crunch to obligate those funds. We're still working on the same timelines as the original ARPA funds, and so we do need to obligate those by the end of 2024. So we're working hard to prepare to spend 5 million this year, or at least to obligate it. Once again, the city won't directly vet applications. Applications will come through developers, and affordability requirements will vary based on project type. We are looking closely at conflict of interest. We want to make sure that the projects are clean in that regard. And we will look at how to ensure long-term affordability through some of the same mechanisms we use with other programs. And so the fun part is we have these 5 program areas, but what do we do with them? So I mentioned earlier the home repair, looking at how we layer that with public housing. When somebody purchases a unit off the market for home ownership, we're also looking at making that same opportunity available for rental rehab. We are looking at working through our public housing program, pairing it with the Affordable Housing Fund program, and then Home 80 or voucher assistance, really trying to look at how we build stacks of opportunities for maximum impact. The Wichita Land Bank, once we're able to really create that conduit that has been imagined and designed, we'll be able to feed the home programs. It'll be a resource and opportunity for parcels that can then be looked at and purchased by developers, similar to what we're doing with the 9th and Ash parcel. And so the fun thing is that these, Sally mentioned silo busting, these programs were not part of the same group before. Public housing and home repair have a lot of commonalities, but they did not work together. And so bringing them into the same group has really created an exciting synergy that's been so much fun to pair together. And so my hope today in presenting this was to share with the board, each board is doing amazing work, each board has its segment, but there's so much more going on, and your work really backs our ability to do this, to build this bigger structure of opportunity. So I'm grateful to each board member for what they bring. With that, I think on your agendas, it said that Logan was going to present. She wasn't able to be here today, but we wanted to just kind of cap off with a little bit of a look ahead at some things that are in the works. I will say one thing about the housing department. Sometimes we will share concepts and ideas, such as the Affordable Housing Fund, and then we run into reality and we find that we have to modify. So these are always dreams, but we like to put them out there. We like to get the feedback, and we are diligent in continuing to see where we can go with it. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. So again, affordable housing strategy, right? We have all these tools. We just talked about it. They're not just in my department, they're in other departments too. And how do we maximize some of that? Again, our funding sources don't make it easy. Our different requirements from different entities don't make it easy, right? But in the end, silo busting. Let's see how we can do this. So I want to start off first, just because it's timely, on the consolidated plan. You talked about the comprehensive plan. Troy talked about the comprehensive plan. We also have another plan called the consolidated plan. The consolidated plan is a federal requirement related to the community development funds. It is a 5-year strategic plan. But one common thing, the consolidated plan has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Okay, I'm going to make, we could go, I could go, we'll go into the annual action plan and the PHA plan. They all have to complement each other. They all have different requirements, but they all have to be consistent. So the reason this is timely is we are right now in the process of developing our consolidated plan for July of 2024 through the next 5 years. And we started this process in the fall of 2023. We actually hired an outside consultant, WFN, to come in and do this. So because we received those federal grants, we have to create this 5-year strategic plan. And then, as you see, each year of that 5 years, we have to create what they call the annual action plan. So the 5-year plan says, what are the needs? What are the goals? And the annual action plan says, how are you going to do it? You have to define what are you going to do in the next 12 months that's in your consolidated plan. How are you going to put that forward? It's all kinds of fun. I'll tell you, working in HUD systems is a nightmare. Never ties. we laugh about the system HUD makes us use for this, but it is that opportunity, and there's a lot of public engagement involved in this, and that's why I say it's very, very timely. So WFN has been attending DAB meetings, sending out surveys, trying to get input from the community and the stakeholders about what are our priorities and how should we deploy the resources we're going to get over the next 5 years. And just to give you an idea, so the 3 major programs covered by that consolidated plan are CDBG, the Home Investment Partnership Program, and the Emergency Solutions Grant. And so those $3 amounts I have listed here, that's what we are receiving for the current program year. Now, these programs are all funded by HUD through appropriations from Congress. So could they change? Absolutely. Do they change? Absolutely. And we can only guess. So when we create a 5-year consolidated plan, our best guess is to say 5 years at current year funding. And you know what? It's not usually that far off. From year to year, we don't often see big swings. Once in a great while, we will see it when there's a lot of contention in Congress. So we are working on that right now. So that process for this, and this is not just the consolidated plan, this is the whole 5-year, the whole idea around it is we have to determine the needs in our community. We have to determine what those priorities are. Figure out what resources come from HUD through this and what other resources we can leverage, right, in order to address those priorities. Setting the goals in the consolidated plan, creating the annual action plan each year to try and reach those goals. And then each year we have to report out. And just like in finance, you get the CAFR, from us you get the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. Everything's an acronym with us. So it is really cyclical. We go through this. I do have a crystal ball in my office. I had a staff member buy it because I was always known for saying, if I had a crystal ball, I would know what HUD's going to do or Congress is going to do. So someone actually bought me one. It is in my office. It just doesn't work. We do the best we can to predict what's going to happen. In 2019, would I have thought COVID was going to happen when they created the last consolidated plan? No way, right? Never. It didn't happen in my lifetime. Would have never thought. So I do kind of laugh because HUD expects us to know what is going to be the need in our community in 2028. And I go, oh, I really wish my crystal ball was working. We do the best that we can. But, and then layered within that is another plan, an analysis we have to do, which at this point is called the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. And so, you know, as the housing administrating office, we have a responsibility to, as HUD calls it, affirmatively further fair housing. Try saying that really fast, but that's the term they like to use. And so we have to go through and try and identify impediments to fair housing in our community and then deploy resources to address those impediments. So, and we do that. We bring in fair housing training. We, you know, try to identify, you know, areas where we may see discrimination, refer them for legal services, things like that. But we also, one of the big needs I see in our community is ADA accessibility for people with disabilities. We do not have enough units. We don't even have a great inventory of where we have units. And when I talk to a developer, I'm always like, please build them adaptable. It is so much easier to build it with a 36-inch door than to try and retrofit it later. This is just another plan, another policy that we have to create and follow. So they definitely don't make it easy. The data in the consolidated plan comes from many places. So census and, comprehensive affordable housing strategies, surveys, stakeholder meetings, things like that. And we pull that all together to try and come up with some reasonable goals and expectations. I want to tell you a little bit of what we found so far, right? We're not ready to publish the plan, but some of that data is already there, right? This slide shows what we're talking about, cost burden and severe cost burden. So when people, and I'm talking the affordable housing, the housing affordability side. It's actually kind of both, but when we talk about the need for more affordable housing, it's a lot of it is related to how many households we have right now that are cost burdened, whether they're renters or they're homeowners. And we have huge numbers. There's details in these slides that break it down. First one was renters. This one is for homeowners, but I can summarize it in lines right there, right? This renter households, 26,270 households are cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income for renters. And over almost 13,000 of them are paying more than 50% for their housing costs in our community right now. And on the homeowner side, this is not just a renter side, homeowner side, over 14,000 households paying more than 30% and 5,300 paying more than 50%, 30%, 50%. This screams, people need help. We definitely need more affordable housing in our community. I do hear that a lot from people. Housing's cheap in Wichita. Housing's cheap. I said, yes, or wages. One hand. And we do, and it's, the other presentation I did, part of the reason we have those other programs, the individual and family development program, is we're tackling housing affordability from both sides, the cost of the housing and family income. We're trying to increase family income and decrease housing costs. So tackling it from both sides. The survey that WFN put out, asking people that participated to rank the important needs related to housing, and affordable housing units was number one. Is that surprising? No. Homeownership opportunities, down payment assistance, housing rehabilitation, and rent assistance. Boy, I feel like they just defined my whole department. Those are the things that we do, but that's what they're asking more of. And then what steps should the city take to improve housing choices? And this does go beyond just housing cost, right? Transportation is huge. And they called it out in the survey to say, reduce transportation costs, because that really does play in. But yes, more affordability, better public transit, quality education for battling it by raising, people out of poverty, increasing neighborhood safety, and then other. So that's really what we're seeing so far. That plan, we're actually coming to the council at a workshop in February. We will start putting that, finalizing the recommendations for that plan. They will be finalized in May of this year and sent to HUD by May 15th for implementation starting July 1st. So it just happens to be great timing, and it's great for having these kind of conversations. But I also wanted to talk a little bit nationally. This comes from HUD themselves, that it's not just Wichita, okay? That there's only 60, nationwide, for every house, 100 households that need affordable housing, there's only 62. That leaves 38 households without affordable housing. And that 24% of renters are severely cost burdened nationwide, not just us. And that Black households are 1.5 times more likely to live in places where they're exposed to environmental hazards. This is not my slide, this is HUD's. And More than 75% of households making less than $30,000 a year are moderately or severely housing cost burdened. Are we surprised by that? No. If your income's under $30,000 a year, your housing cost burden is going to be high. Right. Additionally, they provide strategies. This came straight from HUD. This is right out of their toolkit, their playbook, and that we have to have an effective use of public funds. This ties right back. Troy and I did not collaborate at all. Number one strategy is effective use of public funds. Effective use of external funds, that's private funds. That's HUD's nice way of saying private funds. Looking at land use and entitlement properties, right? We have to look at, are there ways that we can expand the number of units in our community? And then the development of public property is highly recommended by HUD, and I'm not saying the city's looking at that, but we should be at least looking at that, right? It is a means that a lot of communities are tackling, trying to build more affordable housing. This is just an overall slide. I'd be happy to send out this whole toolkit to everybody. It's pretty fascinating to look at it because it is happening everywhere, right? So talking about resources, some of this will be duplicative of what Troy talked about. So both 9% and 4% low income housing tax credits. Tax credits are the #1 vessel for building affordable housing, truly subsidized that low income housing. We as a community are very challenged. The state of Kansas tends to prioritize rural projects and small projects. So in the 9% realm, in the last 7 years, there's only been 4 projects in Wichita. There's been 8 in Kansas City. There's been more in I gotta think, I think it was Ottawa. I'm like, what the heck? I have the numbers, I will share them with you. It's not just about number of projects, it's about dollars invested. And Derby's gotten more. And Summit's gotten more. And Salina's gotten more than Wichita. So that's where, and I've been talking with Troy and economic development and going, we really need to figure out how to encourage more tax credit developments here. It's very critical if we're going to make headway. So those are the 2 biggest. There are other opportunities, new market tax credits, historic tax credits. They're all listed here. These are ones that are typically used in the affordable housing arena, right? Notice I didn't include Troy's because they're not necessarily common, but just because they're not common doesn't mean they shouldn't be used. Do you see what I'm saying? So if we can pair these different resources together, we can make a much bigger impact going forward. So at this point, I could go in very long on talking about the QAP and what we need to do for tax credits, but I told Sarah we don't have time. The one thing I did want to say before I break off is we are doing this year, it's not quite the same as last year's housing conference in April. So April 17th and 18th, we do have Century 2. We're just restructuring it, making it like a conference and having to deal with meals and registrations and all of that was just a kind of a nightmare. So we are restructuring it and looking at doing 2 days where we want to do 1 full day for housing providers and service providers. And I will be tapping many of the departments to come participate in that. But part of this is we really want to sell to developers. We want to have an opportunity for developers and landlords to come in, have discussions, learn. We're also going to have a track on homelessness. I found out day before yesterday that the U.S. Interagency, the U.S. I know, what's the I? Interagency Council on Homelessness, the big organization covering homelessness wants to come and present here in Wichita. I'm so excited. Getting on, and we call it usage, see we use the we use the abbreviation, is huge because we can help us tap into resources and guidance, and they will be the organization that will certify whether or not we hit functional zero for veteran homelessness by the end of the year like we want to. So that's huge. So we're going to have a whole track for related to homelessness on the day of providers, but we're also going to do a second day, and that second day is really going to be for residents. It's going to be about fair housing. It's going to be about the new retaliatory eviction ordinance. It's going to be about the home repair program and how they might be able to tap into that. So rather than being a true conference feel, and there's going to be no registration. People can come and go to one session, leave, come back for another, that sort of thing. But we still think it's very important. There is so much going on. We'd like to dig into some of this at a much deeper level on a session by session basis. So that's coming in April. So, and then we're open for any other discussion you might want to have. Sarah?
Sure, and if you saw me typing over there, I am actually prepping an email with this slide deck for anyone who wants it for reference later. We know that this was a tremendous amount of information, probably information overload for many people, but I really am so grateful for everybody who took their afternoon to learn more about affordable housing and the whole housing environment within the city of Wichita. We had originally intended to do some Q&A time, but we are actually right at our stated ending time. So what I'd like to do instead is that we do have a quorum of members from the Affordable Housing Review Board. And so I would like to formally adjourn the meeting with that board. And then we will probably go ahead and close out the Teams meeting. But I think if staff members are able to stick around for a few extra questions in the room, we can do that. And then I also just want to offer to both boards, our speakers were so willing to give their time and talents and knowledge today. And I am glad to reach out to any of them to bring them back to any of the board meetings in the future if that can help to inform some of the work that we do. So I hope, we ran a little bit long, but really good information. And so I hope that that can be a good substitute for an open Q&A that was planned. So with that in mind, I just want to make sure that we get documentation on a motion and a second, but I would take a motion to adjourn and a second from Affordable Housing Review Board members. Okay, I think I've got Anthony and Siobhan. And all in favor of adjourning? Thank you. So we will formally adjourn the meeting, quit recording, and then take time for some additional questions here. And thank you to all of you who attended online as well. Oh, sure. Yeah, if Roger would go ahead and shut the recording off, then yeah, we could keep our online folks available for just a bit longer, if you'd like. Okay. It looks like we have three members online. Are there any questions that you all would like to ask of any of our presenters today? Okay. I'm seeing head shake no, so I will go ahead and close out the Teams meeting. Thank you to you both. I know I'm seeing Miranda and Lucas on camera, and both of them had pop-up things come up that they weren't able to be here in person. So just really appreciate your efforts to be here online. Gary as well. I still see him on here. So thank you all, and we will see you soon.